This time on Ask Radrat, we're talking about little kid skate teams, and we're also talking about if cell phones make skateboarding better. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Radrat Video, the channel where you can learn something new about skateboarding 3 times a week. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we talk about skateboarding topics, from skateboarding culture to tricks to video games, anything in between. Today, we're answering your questions on my series Ask Radrat. First one for you today is from Zach Taylor 159, who asks, what's your take on Grizzly Groms, or any other little kid skate team that maybe I haven't heard of? His thoughts were basically that it's good because it helps kids to progress, it lets them be around other kids, but it gives them the opportunity to learn from pros, to learn more about the business side. But it also puts more pressure on them. He said you have dads out there throwing fetuses off of stair sets, and it really pushes a mentality that you have to be doing gnarly stuff at a really young age. So I thought of a couple other teams. First was Quicksilver. They used to have all these ads with kids. Dylan Ryder used to do ads for them. And that makes sense because it's a clothing brand. So you have a kid's line of smaller size clothes, you have to show them off with smaller size people. So that made sense. And there was also Termite skateboards, which were these tiny skateboards made specifically for kids. And so with both of those cases, it makes sense for the company at least to advertise to kids using kids because the products are designed for kids, you know. But for most companies, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to have a kid team because most kids don't look up to other kids their own age. You know, when you're 14 and 15 years old, you're looking up to the 20-somethings who are out there doing stuff in their life. You're not looking up to kids in the next grade from you in school. So trying to advertise to kids with kids doesn't make a lot of sense if you don't have to. It also doesn't make sense to sponsor kids and then hope that they'll stay with you forever. You know, you sponsor this kid while he's still young and he'll stick with you when he's the hottest pro. He probably won't. He'll switch to another team, right? So I don't really get that from a business perspective, but I do think it makes sense as the kid. So if you're out skating every day anyway, and you stop to take a photo shoot every now and then, I think that's totally fine. It'd be tough to say no to making money doing something you're already doing anyway, but you gotta be real smart about it. I think that's the biggest concern. There was an interesting thing I read from Steve Barra when I was researching this last video about his tricks, where he talked about how Howard Stern, when he was getting started, he was starting to get really popular, people would recognize him on the street and all that stuff, and he said he was making $18,000 a year living in a studio apartment. And people who have a lot of public attention and are famous aren't necessarily rich. And that's definitely the case for skateboarding. So if you put all your eggs in the skateboarding basket, you spend all of your time traveling and skating and skating and skating, just planning on going pro, and then it either doesn't work out or it does work out and you're barely getting by, then it is kind of a dangerous thing to do. So being on a kid team isn't necessarily bad. You can learn a lot from it. You can be a lot better at skateboarding because of it. But if you neglect everything else and you decide to not bother with school and you decide all this other kind of stuff, you focus your life on skateboarding because of a team like that, then I think that that could definitely be a negative thing. The next question is from Jeff Thompson, who asks, is today's rapid skateboarding progression a result of smartphones' pocket cameras? High-level skating is being captured much more often, 10 times, and seen by more eyes. Cameras have always been part of skating for missions, but with everyone now capturing and sharing amazing footage, is that the major force behind today's rapid skateboarding progression? I think there's definitely a lot to be said for that. A lot of the progression in skateboarding comes from being able to know what has happened before and knowing what's possible. I talked about this a long time ago in my video about taking footage back to the 80s. The people back then were amazing at skating, but they didn't know that you could do a tray flip nose grind. They wouldn't have even thought of that, you know? So being able to have more information and learning more and more is definitely a huge driving force. One thing that came to mind, I have a series called Know Your Tricks playlist right here where you can learn about who invented different tricks. But one of the hardest things that I have come up when I do research is there not being footage. Someone will say they saw something and they're pretty sure it was around this year and it might have been that guy. I'm not entirely sure. Well, there's no footage of it, it's just someone's word, and it's really tough to pin that down. And then you do pin it down and you figure out, oh, this guy invented it and this year, but this guy also invented it 2 years earlier. but they didn't know about each other, and neither of them filmed it, and all this kind of stuff. And not being able to share that information and know things about what came out made the second inventor duplicate work. He didn't have to invent that trick. He could have seen the other guy do it, but there was no internet, there was no, cell phone footage and all that. You go back far enough and you get back into the 80s and you see how many tricks are credited to the same people. Who was the first person to do a slappy? You'll see John Lucero or Neil Blender, Lance Mountain comes up sometimes. But those guys were just in the right scene. What about this kid in Iowa who did something just like that? It's tough to know where this stuff comes from because it wasn't documented. But that's not a problem anymore. Everything's documented all the time. If your friend's working on some weird trick over there, you can bust out your phone, record it, and when he just happens to land it, put it on Instagram right that second. And suddenly thousands of people can see that trick. And sharing all that information makes it a lot easier to know what's out there and to be able to learn more. I think about, what if Rodney Mullen was cloned, okay? There's a 10-year-old Rodney Mullen running around in Florida right now, but he's got no access to the internet at all, or books, or video games, or anything like that. And he's doing the exact same thing our real Rodney Mullen did, where he's in Florida in a barn learning how to do kickflips. And he just invented them. But he doesn't know that that's already been done. Imagine how much further he could go knowing everything than we know now. So I think that that's a huge part of why progression is at such a rate that it is right now. But there's a little more to it. Not just having video, but also having trick tips and having more information, having Reddit and discussion forums and all that kind of stuff where you can ask for tips and you can talk to people who have done the trick before and you can learn from them and you can find all kinds of videos and get inspired and everything too. So I think phones have had a major, major impact on skateboarding progression, and it's probably not going to stop anytime soon. So that's it for this time. Ask me all of your questions. I have a link to my Instagram and my Twitter below. Send me questions on there and I'll try to get to them next time I record. Until next time, here are some more videos I did recently. I do a lot more than just these Ask Radrat questions, so check some of those out too. And make sure you tap my logo on screen right there to subscribe so you can keep learning new things about skateboarding 3 times a week. Thanks for watching.